Hello guys, and welcome to another video. I apologise, I know it's been a while since my last one. I've had a little bit of anxiety about recording, I'm not sure why. But anyway, I thought I'd, break the hiatus with just a quick video about what I've been reading recently. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. It's going to be a bit rambly, but hopefully you take some recommendations from this and it'll inform your own reading. I want to say thank you to everyone that's commented recently. It's been really heartwarming to read everyone's positivity. But anyway, let's get into it. So the first one actually is the one I finished most recently, and that is The Way of Kings, Part 1, by Brandon Sanderson. So this is actually a book that's split into two parts, and I'm reading the second part at the moment, as you can see by the bookmark. So this is part of a series by Brandon Sanderson, who's probably one of the most famous, most prolific fantasy authors alive today. The series is called The Stormlight Archive, and it's projected to be 10 books. But as you can see, these two books make up one book, so there's going to be a lot of pages in this series. I believe so far he has written 4 books, and it's going to take quite a while for him to complete the series, because he writes other books as well at the same time. And I've wanted to read this because I wanted to read more fantasy, because I'm writing a novel at the moment which is a fantasy story, and I wanted to kind of expand my reading. And epic fantasy is something I don't read a lot of. It's probably because I have some prejudices against the genre. I tend to find epic fantasy to be a bit derivative, a bit unoriginal, and mostly just imitations of Tolkien. So I had a bit of a prejudice going into this book, but I can safely say I've been immensely enjoying it. I'm reading it very quickly because it's very good, and it is a real page turner. The length of the book is quite extraordinary, obviously. I think each of these parts is about 600 pages, so overall it's 1200 pages for the first book in the series, which is quite long, but you really don't feel that length. Of course it can be intimidating at first, but I've really not felt fatigued or bored by the length, because he's such a good writer, and he uses multiple viewpoints. There's 3 main character viewpoints I've encountered, and each of them is distinct, unique, and is written very well. And each of them has a mystery that unfolds over the course of the book that really gets you to keep reading because you want to know what happens next. And it's not done in a cheap or kind of cliffhangery way. It's really a mystery that unfolds. And I'm sure many of you have heard of this series or this book or this author, and I had for a long time, and I'm glad I finally decided to read something of his, because he's definitely an author I'm going to return to once I finish this book. And I think what many people would say is the greatest strength of Sanderson's writing is his world building. He's got a great imagination, and I think what's so striking is how his world building really affects the story. It's not just background dressing. For example, I won't spoil anything, but the continent of Roshar that this series takes place on is affected by very vicious storms, magical kind of storms, and that informs how he's created the landscape, the flora and the fauna, as well as the culture of the people that live there. And I just think it's really impressive how he's blended the narrative and the world building, so that it actually matters. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this book at the moment. My favourite viewpoint, if you read it, is definitely Shallan. Really enjoying her arc, and I'm going to be sad when I get to the end of what he's written so far, because he's written 4 books out of 10. It takes him a few years to release each one, so I think I'm going to space out my reading of the series with other books, and then I'll have to get into his other works, like Mistborn, which maybe I should have started with in hindsight, but oh well. Yeah, so I've really been enjoying it, and it's really fired my imagination for my own writing. And if you are wanting to write something yourself, you should check out Brandon Sanderson's lecture series on YouTube. He talks about the process of writing and gives some great advice, because he is a very prolific author. So yeah, let me know if you've read this one and what you thought. It's surpassed all my expectations for sure, and I can't wait to finish this and move on to the next one. Anyway, I don't even know if I said the name, The Way of Kings. Way of Kings, which is the Stormlight Archive, Book 1, Part 1. As I said, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I would really recommend you check this out if you like fantasy. So, that counts as one book, technically. Continuing on the theme of fantasy, we have the writing's a bit hard to see, but it's 6 of Crows by Lee Bardugo. And this again is a fantasy book, but it's not epic fantasy, it's urban, I guess you would say, and it's a heist novel, actually. And what attracted me to this was that I'd never read a heist novel, and definitely not a fantasy heist, a magical heist. That's new to me, so I thought that was quite intriguing. I've not heard of this author, but she has a different series of books called Shadow and Bone, which was made into a Netflix series, which you can see there. But the reason I chose this over that is primarily because it was a heist, and I thought that was quite interesting. Now, I should say I put this book down about a third of the way in, and I've not picked it back up. And that's not to say it's bad. It just wasn't what I was expecting, and that's partially my fault, because it's a young adult book, and I didn't know that, because I like to know kind of as little as possible about the book that I'm going to read, and I just didn't notice that, and that's fine. I have no problem reading young adult, but I haven't read young adult in a long while, and I don't know if this is the case with all young adult, but it really put me off this book was the way in which all of the characters seem to be trying very hard to be cool and badass, and it just really didn't sit with me. I just found it kind of a little bit cringy, like, because they're all, remarkably they're all like 17, and they're like doing criminal stuff and killing people and acting very like cool and edgy, I guess you would say. And that's fine if you like that. It's just I couldn't get into it. I just imagined a lot of teenagers trying to be very cool, and it was like, oh, I can't take it very seriously. Even though I think the writing's actually very good, and the world building again is excellent. But the main draw of this book is the characters, and a lot of people like them. I just couldn't connect with them on any meaningful level, which is fine. I may come back to it at a later date. But like I said, the world building is very interesting, and she uses aspects of cultures that aren't often represented well in fantasy. For instance, the main city that the novel takes place in takes a lot from Dutch culture and history. It's an independent, kind of mercantile port city. I thought it was quite interesting because I've never seen that before in a fantasy setting. This kind of Dutch influence, and she's also taking Scandinavian, Russian and Chinese. But overall it gives this impression of a Northern European kind of fantasy, rather than, knights and castles and that kind of thing. So I thought that was quite unique, actually. And the magic system is also quite unique. Again, I won't spoil that, but if you like this kind of fiction, I would recommend it. I guess, had an incorrect presupposition about it. Anyway, that's Six of Crows by Lee Bardugo. Next we have something a bit different. I'm sure some of you already know who it is, but This is Marcus Aurelius, and this is Meditations. I'm sure many people have heard of this by now, but it's a book I like to return to every now and again, because it's not a novel. It's you could call it a philosophical text, but really it's the journal, the writings of a Roman emperor, which were never intended to be published. And Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor in the 2nd century AD, I believe, and he was the last of what is called the 5 good emperors, which was a period of, good rule in the Roman Empire that was often marked with sadistic or just straight up insane emperors, or incompetent. And Marcus Aurelius was one of the better ones, one of the best ones. And I think what's so interesting about this book is that you gain a window into the personal life and the personal thoughts of one of the most powerful men in the world from almost 2,000 years ago. And what you discover is it's a man that has the same problems, the same anxieties that many of us do, even though he was in such a unique position. And you can really reach across the chasm of time and feel like you connect with him in a way that you can never do with other ancient sources. And it has advice and thoughts on life, religion, relationships, everything you could think of. It's actually quite a short book. About half of this is explanatory notes. So it's easy to read and easy to reread. I would say an important note with texts like these is the translation. I think this is quite a good translation. This is the Penguin Classics version, which is translated by Martin Hammond, just so you could read the same one as me if you wanted. But the translation is very important with these kind of books, because a bad translation can really create a bad reading experience. And there's a bit of a debate in translation of these kind of sources about whether you should preference readability or kind of closeness to the original text, whether you should convey the meaning of what was said or try to convey accurately the individual words. And I tend to prefer the readability side. I think the amazing thing about this book is that when you get a good translation, it feels as you're reading someone today writing a journal. And I think as long as the translator can convey the meaning, which is difficult in itself, of course, but as long as they can convey the meaning accurately, I don't think the individual rhythm or word choice of the sentence matters as much as it does in something like poetry. But I mean, that's just a difference of opinion. I think this translation is quite good, but I think there are probably better ones. And if you are going to read this, which I would definitely recommend to anyone really, it's really interesting and it provides a lot of very good advice. If you are going to read this, try not to get the cheapest translation, because often those translations are from about 100 years ago, and you will get this very stilted, old-fashioned translation that doesn't read as smoothly as it could. I think it will just degrade your reading experience, really. Try to get a modern translation so that it's written in words how we would speak today. And I don't think I mentioned this author, Marcus Aurelius. He espoused a kind of philosophy called Stoicism, what he really believed in and his teachers believed in, and it forms a kind of school of philosophy of the ancient Greeks and Romans, whereby it's kind of a method for living, of how to control your emotions, how to understand what is and what isn't within your control, and kind of viewing life in a unique way, which I think we could all benefit from. Anyway, I've rambled a bit, but that's Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, and it's a book I come back to, occasionally, just to try and get more advice, more wisdom. And then, kind of along the same theme, is a non-fiction book, and this is Rubicon by, you can barely see it, but Tom Holland, not the actor, but that would be quite impressive. This is a history of the fall of the Roman Republic, so the period in which the Roman Republic becomes the Roman Empire. And I try often to read a non-fiction, mostly history, and a fiction at the same time, just because I think it breaks up both and, keeps the interest flowing in both, and they're different enough that it isn't confusing or frustrating. And I don't think I've said before, but I went to university for archaeology and anthropology, but actually I didn't learn much about the Roman Empire and the Roman Republic. I chose to follow other subjects, like mainly actually it was Mesoamerica, so the history of Mexico and the northern part of South America, and I did my dissertation on Viking England, actually. So I never really got exposed to much Roman and Greek history through choice, and now I'm beginning to get a lot more interested in that, so this serves as a kind of, it's often recommended as an introduction to the period. It's very readable. It's a narrative kind of history, so you don't get bogged down in specific details and minutiae. It's trying to tell a story, and I really enjoy that aspect because it's not like you're reading a textbook. It's more like you're reading fiction, really. And I find it really, really readable, really interesting, and I'm enjoying it quite a lot. So I think after this, I'll decide whether I want to move forward in time and learn more about the Roman Empire, or backwards in time and learn more about the Roman Republic. I have actually been to Rome, and obviously I was awed by the ancient structures and everything, as well as the food. The food was great. So I think it's a shame that I don't know very much about it, so I'm trying to rectify that. I think it's a very interesting moment in time. This is very well reviewed. It's a narrative history, so it's not tedious or difficult, and it's supposed to be a good introduction to the period, and so far it definitely is. So I think if you're interested in Roman history, definitely give this a look. And you can see, maybe not, I paid £1 for it, which is a great deal. I mean, a great deal, not a great deal of money. I always try and get my books second hand, and this was quite cheap. So yeah, this is Rubicon by Tom Holland. And finally, I don't have it with me, but the last book I was going to talk about is called Cloud Atlas, and it's by an author called David Mitchell. And there's a comedian called David Mitchell from England, but it's not him. And I immensely enjoyed that book. It was probably, it is one of my favourite books of all time, actually. And I'd never read it until recently. And the reason I don't have it with me is I lent it to someone on my recommendation so they could read it. Yeah, I immensely enjoyed the book, and I think I'm going to record a video just dedicated to that book, because it's a book that means a lot to me, and it's influenced my own writing quite a great deal, and I think it deserves its own discussion. But let me know if you read that, because I know there was a film that was released a few years ago with, I think Tom Hanks is in it, and I have not watched that yet, but I think I should. But yeah, let me know if you read it and what you thought, because it's a very unique book, and yeah, I want to talk about it more in detail. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed my rambling. Maybe you took some recommendations away from this, and I'm going to try and post more regularly. And yeah, thank you for watching, thank you for all your kind comments, and hopefully see you soon. Alright, thank you.